So let's get to the fun part. And the reason why anybody's going to be watching us here would be who is going to be the next head coach at Nebraska. So we could sit here for the next 4 hours, Connor, and throw out names. I'm sure you've done it. I'm sure the people that watch you have done it. The viewers here, we went live as soon as Scott Frost was dismissed, and people threw out names, and I thought some were ridiculous, but others I thought, hey, there's a good candidate. I didn't think of them. So do you have any kind of reasonable short list?
Yeah, I've been trying to put together my list because I'm about to make a bunch of videos about these guys and give some in-depth analysis. And we've got to preface this. There is still at least 2 months before this short list gets refined, unless Trev Alberts finds the guy. I just think it's long shot because the guy is probably employed right now. My number one by far, and a lot of people don't like this one, obviously, is Urban Meyer. And the baggage he has is worth accepting if you're Nebraska to try and get the program back on track. You look at what he left at Ohio State. People try to say he left a mess everywhere he went. He got Ryan Day in there, and they are a well-oiled machine because of what he built at Ohio State. If you go back to the early 2000s, the mid-2000s when Jim Tressel was there, they could never get over the hump. They were good, but they couldn't become great. Now Ohio State is great. Multiple top 5 recruiting classes, multiple NFL players. They go to the playoff every year. And if they don't get to the playoff one year, they're damn close. So if you can get a guy like Urban, you've got to take him. Now, I don't think that one's realistic because you'd have to get Trev Alberts interested and you'd have to have Urban interested. And I think it'll be a real long shot. So some reasonable guys who still fit that bill of a guy who has that CEO experience and can come into a program and get the culture right. My number one has to be Dave Aranda. I'm looking to see how he finishes out this season. He just lost to BYU. He had a big follow-up with a win over Texas State. I think they won by like 30. So Dave Aranda is a good candidate that I think Trev Alberts is going to have to look at because Nebraska really needs to focus on their defense. If you look at the tradition at Nebraska, they're built on defense. Their offense was always good enough, but the defense is what people knew them for. And in the Big Ten West, the defense is what teams are known for. So if you're going to stop teams and you're going to win games, we got to get a defensive-minded coach in here who can really right that group because it's been a while since we've had a really dominating defense. Mike Riley was not a defensive-minded coach. Scott Frost, not a defensive-minded coach. Well, that's 7 years right there. Bo Pelini was, but if you go back to the Bo Pelini days, he really fell off from, I think it was 2012 to 14. So it's been a long time since Nebraska's had that, and I think it's important to get back to it. Another coach that I really like, who I'm sure you watched this week, Mark, was Lance Leipold. That guy is a stud. He came from a Division III school. I think it was Wisconsin Whitewater. He's got 7 Division III national championships or something crazy. And people are going to try to say he's not ready for a big job like this because of that. But if you're going to find a guy who has potential and a guy who could really turn a program around, that's got to be your number one. As good as Aranda's been, he didn't do what Leipold did at Kansas. In his second year, they're already 3-0. They're a 9-point favorite against Duke this week. They have a superstar quarterback who I think his adjusted completion percentage is nearly 70%. He's working with a lot of new talent from the portal, something Nebraska has not done well. And if you could get a guy like that, he's going to be able to build a culture really fast. People are going to buy into what he's got to say because of his recency. And I would say those are my top 2 right now that I'm really looking to watch going forward.
Yeah, what Leopold's pulling off right now is just pretty remarkable. We'll see if it's sustainable or unless he moves on to Nebraska, because my goodness, Kansas has been a wasteland for more than a decade. And over the last half of last season, he beat Texas. And then you see their other results to where they were losing those games by 5 and 6 touchdowns. They're suddenly playing 1-score games against West Virginia and Texas Tech and other much better programs in the Big 12. And then bam, I think it slapped a lot of people across the face as a 2-touchdown, roughly 2-score underdog against Houston this past week. They win the game by 18 points and he's 3-0. And like you say, a really good shot at getting to 4-0.
You know what's interesting about him and why he's going to be such a hot name for Nebraska? Dave Aranda is a good one because Dave Aranda took over after Matt Rule, but that team was already pretty sharp. You've got a lot of Texas recruits. They're a solid program in Texas, even though they haven't been great because they had that little death penalty type of issue after Art Briles. But Kansas was in a very similar situation to Nebraska. They were in the gutter. They were winning one game 2 games a season, getting blown out nonstop, had no culture. They couldn't find the right coach there. The fan base, I mean, it's totally different than Nebraska. Their fan base completely gave up. And because he was able to come into a setting like that and get such remarkable results in this second year, really is going to speak to Nebraska fans, because a lot of Nebraska fans are looking at Nebraska as 7 years in the gutter. And it's going to take a massive hire to be able to bring us out of that. So we're going to have to find someone who can really shift the narrative around the Nebraska football name and start to get recruits to want to come here. Right now, we say recruits want to come here, but are they getting the top recruits, the top 4 and 3-star guys, or are they getting the 4 and 3-star guys who other schools don't want? We don't really know. So I just think it's going to be a guy like Leopold who has already done something like the Nebraska job.